Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Fantastic Fives, the show where we tell you the absolute correct 5 answers to a particular topic in comics, and you tell us what we forgot and how wrong we are in the comments. This week's extra special, extra spooky scary episode is all about the top 5 best comic Draculas. Dracula, the myth, the monster, the legend. We've all come to know and love, or fear, Dracula as the world's most well-known vampire. But even though he's supposedly centuries old, he's actually only been around for a little over 100 years since his introduction in Bram Stoker's 1897 novel. It's hard to imagine a time before his sinister influence was ingrained in our minds. But just as our ideas about vampires have changed and our interpretations of Dracula have evolved from the horrific to the romantic to the heroic, there have been countless iterations of the Dark Prince in every conceivable area of pop culture, and comics are no exception. Number 5, Don Dracula. Okay, get this. In the late 70s, Osamu Tezuka, the god of manga, and creator of such characters as Astro Boy, Kimbo the White Lion, and Blackjack, decided he wanted to get away from the darker work he'd been focused on for most of the last decade and make something fun and funny. So naturally, he picks Dracula. Don Dracula is the story of Dracula as a devoted single father moving his teenage daughter, Chocula, his manservant, Igor, and his entire Transylvanian estate to modern-day Tokyo. As you might imagine, hijinks ensue. Sure, he still has to worry about staying out of daylight and vampire hunters, but Van Helsing becomes a teacher at Chocula's school, and Dracula's other biggest problems are his ex-wife Carmilla and adapting to the big city life of 1970s Tokyo, and all the disco hilarity that comes with it. If that doesn't make you want to know more, then I'm afraid that there just isn't any hope for you. Number 4, DCs Dracula. There have been a number of Draculas and Dracula analogs in DC's history, most notably Count Dragarin of Transylvania, but since it would be cheating to talk about him, let's talk about DC's best Dracula. This one. This is the Dracula from 1991's graphic novel by Doug Moench and Kelly Jones, Batman and Dracula Red Reign. This story set the stage for an Elseworlds trilogy about Batman having to deal with way too many vampires. And if you've never read it, you probably already stopped watching to go find a copy. Since this is a single story, I would just as soon not spoil it for those who haven't read it. And those of you that have already know how crazy it is. So just trust me when I say, if you're into Batman, vampires, and dark and creepy art, Red Reign has got it all. Batman's confrontations with Dracula don't play out quite like you would imagine, and they are not to be missed. Number 3, Mike Mignola's Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. That's a mouthful, but it was worth it for one of the best interpretations of Dracula from one of the most unique artists in modern comics. You'd be hard-pressed to find a better fit than the combination of Mike Mignola's dark atmospheric art and the incredible award-winning visuals of Francis Ford Coppola's horror classic. Topps Comics released this 4-issue adaptation with a script by Roy Thomas in 1992 to coincide with the film's release. So yes, this is a comic adaptation of a movie adaptation of a novel that's been adapted more times than you can count, but that's what makes its quality all the more remarkable. Even if you've seen the movie 100 times, and kids, do not watch this movie. Mignola's signature graphic style captivates and captures memorable moments from the movie in all of their spooky and surreal glory. Plus, where else are you going to see Mike Mignola draw Keanu Reeves? Number 2, Marvel's Dracula. If any company has gotten their public domain money's worth out of Dracula, it has got to be Marvel. Since the early 70s, the House of Ideas has done just about everything there is to do with Dracula, and for the most part it's all been pretty great. From coming up with their own explanation for how the real historical figure, Vlad the Impaler, became the Lord of Vampires known as Dracula in 1973's Dracula Lives No. 2, to giving him his own comic called Tomb of Dracula that ran for more than 5 years, Marvel firmly established their stake on the character. He's fought Blade, Doctor Strange, the X-Men, Apocalypse, the Hulk, Deadpool, and the Defenders, just to name a few. In fact, the only thing Marvel seems to enjoy more than putting Dracula in stories is killing him in those stories. Again and again and again. Each time expecting us to believe that this time it's for real. Come on, Marvel, we know. He's Dracula. And number 1, Del Dracula. Created in 1966 for Del Comics' short-lived line of superhero comics based on the famous Universal monsters, Del Dracula is a modern-day descendant of classic Drac that gains vampire-like superpowers while trying to come up with a cure for brain damage while using bat blood. Yeah, he's a scientist descendant of Dracula, so of course he's going to try to use bat blood. He decides to use his new powers to fight not just evil, but also superstition, because the first thing you do when you learn you can turn into a bat is make a purple and red costume for yourself. Also, let me reiterate that he's going to fight superstition with vampire powers. All of this is great, but the ultimate reason he's the best is that he's the only version of Dracula that can only exist in the world of comics. Del Dracula is without question the most comic booky Dracula of all, and because of that, comics are the only place you'll ever see Del Dracula. That's it for this week. Check back next week when we list off 5 more awesome or not so awesome things. Thanks for watching this episode of Fantastic Fives. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Comics Alliance for more comic facts, and check out comicsalliance.com for more comic awesomeness.